Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your MC, Rich, and I'm joined by my guest, Jordan Palmer. Hey, Jordan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks.
Excited to have you on. I found you out through Kickstarter, which we'll be talking about that in a little bit. Jordan, how long have you been playing Powered by the Apocalypse games, and what was your gateway?
I've been interested in Powered by the Apocalypse games for a while. I think for several years, mainly listening to actual play podcasts. First time I actually got one to the table was when I came up to college about a year and a half ago. I got City of Mist, and that was a lot of fun to play.
Wow, City of Mist, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's a really big book.
It is. You could kill small animals with that thing. That is a beautiful book too. Absolutely love the art in City of Mist. Very cool.
Yeah, absolutely one of the things that sold me on it.
Cool. Well, let's jump on over here and read Sitch. Read a Sitch. So, Jordan, when I asked you what you wanted to talk about in a Read a Sitch, you mentioned the idea of playing to find out and the idea of letting go of expectations.
Yeah, so one thing is, this partially comes from, I'm partially from an improv background as well. Letting go of expectations is really just about, instead of trying to think about what's next and planning, what am I going to do next, you should be listening to the other players around you. And so this is really helpful as a GM when you're trying to, or MC, when you're playing to find out. And I think in Apocalypse World, it specifically talks about how you should care about the situation and care about the outcome, but be ready to let go of what you will hope will happen. And this is kind of on a similar vein, where you're trying to not plan so much, but react. So just let the players kind of give them a little bit of control and kind of go with where they want to take it.
I assume this is specifically talking to the MC when you talk about not trying to have a plan and just going with it, right?
Yeah.
So as the MC, let's say there are a couple players and they want to take things into almost opposite or very different directions. How do you choose who to listen to?
Yeah, well, that's a tough question. And I think as an MC, you can either let the players kind of figure it out and let whichever way they want to go happen, or you can just kind of pick whichever one feels the most natural to you. So I think a lot of your job as in MC is to make exciting things happen, make fun things happen. So you can be I think this is the route that I think would be the most fun. And I think that's kind of a good way when you feel like things could diverge in two different ways, is to just follow the fun.
Are there any tips that you have when you look at the moves sheet as an MC? You're constrained to certain moves. What's a tip or what are some of the ways that you approach taking what the players are giving you in that moment and making sure you use a good variety of moves?
Yeah, I think probably something in terms of variety is just if you're paying attention to what they're doing and the direction they want to take it, then usually there's just a lot of ways that you can take it, if that makes sense, because you as the MC still control the reactions, how the world reacts to them. Mm-hmm. And basically, the principle behind it is you listen and then react instead of planning. And so you still have control of the reactions, and so you can still react in a way that might move them through one way or another, but you just want to be involved in the action, involved in what the player is doing.
Now, when you talk about being involved in what the player is doing, what are some, do you have an example of how that might work? And I know we've got an actual play that we'll have here in a little bit, but just conceptually, how do you normally put that in practice?
Well, it's one of those things that, if you're doing it right, you really shouldn't notice it too much. But, on the reverse end, because if you're listening and you're reacting appropriately, then it won't feel jarring to the players because they're following naturally and you all kind of have, instead of having expectations, you kind of just, it flows naturally. We're on the opposite end. And I've played several games like this. I've had other players do this, other people running games where they have a specific thing that they want to happen. But if the players don't take that hook or they don't go towards that, they feel like they have to kind of steer the players into that direction. So they're constantly introducing things, trying to get them to do their plan instead of listening to what the players are doing. And that's, as a player, is really hard because it kind of feels like they're taking away the agency a little bit. And especially in Powered by the Apocalypse style games, that narrative control is something you want to have or give the player a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the challenges I've run into, Jordan, when I try to be a reactive MC or trying to play off of where the players are taking me is that sometimes I'll have folks who are not used to that play style and perhaps will be maybe defensive or hesitant to take up the reins when I'm trying to hand them narrative authority, trying to let them guide me where the story is going. Do you have any tricks that you use to try to pull that up, either overcome the defensiveness to reassure the player or to pull information or pull reactions from folks who are a little more reserved?
Yeah, what I tend to do when I'm running games is most of my planning is involved in not necessarily what I want to happen, but in what's going on around me. So what is my world like? What is the cast or the world going to be like? And then I have those reactions prepared. And so in some ways, what you can do is you can kind of prep the reactions to things. And then when you have like a world, it becomes easier to rely on the player and be like, okay, so... And then, I mean, also you can just ask questions is obviously a big one. Mm-hmm. Just directly pointing and say, okay, so what would they do in this situation? Or what do you imagine this going like? And that kind of helps players be like, okay, I feel comfortable because he's asking me what's going on next. And you can kind of put that into perspective of the character. So you can be like, how does your character feel about this? Or what does your character think is going to happen? And so it lets them in a very personal way, just like, because this is my character's interpretation. And then you can kind of run with it that way.
Okay, good. Well, are there any improv techniques that you think are really important to bring into this style of play or any improv games that you find yourself relying upon to help you when you're running a Powered by the Apocalypse game?
So, I mean, from an improv perspective, probably the biggest things to know is just being really good about the listening, which is, I mean, we've talked about that previously, is just being involved in what's going on. But then also remember that, and so they talk about this in improv, is that the fun or the humor or whatever you're aiming at doesn't come from the individual. It doesn't come from, so for example, in improv comedy, it doesn't come from quips. That's not where the funny part is. It arises from the situation. And so really focusing on the situation and what's going on instead of trying to force fun or force your character to enact these moments. Just kind of let it evolve naturally, and that's where the fun is.
You made me think of something there, Jordan, in your answer. A lot of times improv is used for comedy. Do you find that the improv style as an MC often leads to comedy?
Well, I mean, especially if you're going for it and you kind of allow it to happen, absolutely. Because, I mean, there's you can obviously have a lot of excitement, a lot of things, but I think comedy is one thing because you get a lot of situations where nobody was expecting a certain thing to happen, and just the natural reaction is to kind of laugh because of sometimes the absurdity of a situation or just how unexpected it was, and it's kind of just... It's just something you weren't expecting to happen, so it kind of contrasts, and that's usually something that's funny.
Alternatively, how do you keep it from becoming a laughing matter? What if, say, the idea, the tone that the group wants for a particular game is a little more serious or dire or gothic or morose, anything that isn't, to where if you are being reactionary in some way, he tries to take it down a path of being a little silly. How do you handle that?
I think that's just something that you kind of have to set the tone of the game up front. And a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games do this really well, is because the tone is and the genre is baked into the moves. And so a lot of the reactions that they have are going to naturally evolve into a certain style of play. And even if you're listening and following the player, I think that how you choose to interpret it is very in the MC's control, because they're doing a lot of the narration. And so how they kind of interpret it can really affect the tone of the game.
Is there anything else about letting go of expectations that you wanted to chat about?
No, I think we covered most of the kind of stuff I was thinking of. So
fantastic. Well, let's jump on over here and open our brains to this game you brought here. Open your brain. So Jordan, currently, as of the release of this particular episode, your game For the Dungeon is still on Kickstarter. We're going to try to get this out where people have several days to hear this and opportunity to take a look at the campaign before it closes. Like I said, I found out about this game just recently. Luckily, Kickstarter does a great job of sourcing everything that's Powered by the Apocalypse to me. I don't know why, but for some reason it says you might like this. So tell me about For the Dungeon. What's the setting of For the Dungeon? What's it about?
So the setting of For the Dungeon is you are basically playing the minions or the underlings of essentially what would traditionally be the big bad in a fantasy campaign. So you might be working for a lich or an evil wizard or something, and you are basically the grunt worker that goes out. And I really wanted to lean in to the minion trope, and so I really focused on just really overzealous, but not entirely competent minions, and that's kind of what I'm playing with.
Nice. I like that. It's a very narrow focus. We've got a whole show dedicated to Dungeon World, and Powered by the Apocalypse and Dungeon World are pretty hand in hand, but this is nice to carve out a specific slice of that. Kind of reminds me of the video game Dungeon Keeper. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's pretty old, but it was a fun little thing where you would be the person building a dungeon. You had all your little minions you play with, so that's pretty cool. In For the Dungeon, what are the mechanics in the game that would be different from, say, Apocalypse World or Dungeon World?
Yeah, so it definitely feels in a vein of more inspired by Powered by the Apocalypse. So the moves are still there.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really have playbooks, so I've taken those out for something a little bit more freeform.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, you just have a set of traits, and each one, so you have a talent, tool, and a belief, and those are just kind of what give you your bonuses. And I want it that way just so that the players, when they are playing the game, they don't feel like they're prescribed anything, but it's basically how can you use the tools in your toolbox.
Okay.
The other thing is that because I don't have playbooks, I have a wide variety of moves, and this is very similar to the Warren. I don't know if you've ever heard that one or not, about the rabbits, where you pick a specific move, and that's kind of what's special about your rabbit. And so in this one, you have the move, and I pretty much just poached a lot of my favorite moves from various Powered by the Apocalypse games. For example, I liked flashback mechanics as one, so one of the moves that you can take, one of the perks, allows you to use flashback mechanics. And so just various things like that influence the way you can play.
So you're saying that if you don't take that perk, you can't have flashbacks?
Unfortunately not. Yeah, it's a very light game, and that was partially the intention. Is just to keep it very light, and turnover tends to be a little bit higher than a normal game because I like the idea of minions being expendable, but also allows you to try out a bunch of different archetypes. And so if you don't get it this time, then when your character inevitably dies doing something stupid, they will be able to pick that up the next time.
You mentioned death. I'm a little curious. How do you handle harm? How does that go?
Harm, basically the way it works is whenever you would take harm, you roll a number of dice. So it starts out at 3, and essentially you're trying to not roll a 1. And then every time you take harm, the number of dice you roll goes down. And so you basically just get closer and closer to that death every time you take harm.
All right. Well, Jordan, what's your favorite move in For the Dungeon, and why?
My favorite move has got to be Cunning Ploy, just because it allows you to do a lot of really fun things. It just kind of reminds me of, minions making traps. I'm going to read it real quick just to...
Yeah, please.
So when you make preparations or attempt to create an advantage, make a roll. And so on a 6, you get to create a new scene trait, which is just similar to the traits, just something that you can use. And then a 4 or 5, it can only be used once and must be used immediately. And obviously, I'm using a little bit different numbers, similar to...
Yeah, I was about to say, wow, what is going on here?
Yeah, the numbers similar to Blaze in the Dark.
Okay.
Yeah, that's I used that number system just because it was a little bit easier to accommodate with the traits. Just 1 die per trait, and then roll.
Okay. So 1 die per trait, you build a die pool. Say if your trait and your tool both fit in what you're trying to do, you'd be rolling 2d6.
Exactly.
And then you're looking for the highest value of those dice?
Mm-hmm.
All right, neat. Well, Cunning Ploy sounds pretty fun. Well, you got me excited to see this in action. Jordan, what do you think about us jumping on over to Act Under Fire and play a little bit of For the Dungeon?
Sounds like a plan.
It is time to act under fire.
Here we are in Act Under Fire, where I get a chance to play a little bit of the game on display. Jordan, you've agreed to allow me to play not only Plussy, who is the signature character for a +1 forward when I'm the host, but you're going to allow me to play Plussy as an orc. Thank you. I always want opportunities to play orcs with a K. My Twitter handle is ORKLORD, so I'm kind of a fan of more like the Warhammer orcs, the crazy ones that probably should have been part of a soccer club. And yeah, that's what it was. So traits are talent, tool, and belief. And then I get a perk, right? So the talent could be Orcish strength. A tool would be an axe, because an axe can solve every problem. And then the belief is that Plussy is convinced that he's clever. And I thought I'd take a perk. It's a little weird for an orc, but I kind of like the particular perk of sneak. Now, what do perks do exactly? Because you get more dice if you can bring your traits into play. But what do perks do?
Perks are kind of what differentiate each of the characters. So, for example, Sneaky is the one that kind of allows you to do what is kind of like a flashback, where basically you did something sneaky that nobody else noticed, and so you get to kind of be like, oh, here's what I did while I was being sneaky. And so it's just kind of different ways to interact, and so each character gets something special they can do.
Okay, cool. All right, so I've got Plussy the orc. He's ready to go. What do we do here, Jordan?
Okay, so I decided to start you out. Basically, essentially, the evil wizard you work for has sent you out to get a hair from the queen so that he can do some experiments with it.
Cool.
So you have gotten into the inner side, and you're basically at the outside of a castle trying to get in whatever way you would choose. So there are various windows. You can occasionally see guards patrolling. What do you plan on doing?
All right, first and foremost, what's this wizard's name, Jordan?
Moloch.
Moloch, that's a very good wizard name. I like that a lot. All right, I definitely want to do this for Moloch then. I am all in for Moloch. Stupid queen. I think the best way to do this is to just simply use my orcish strength to climb up the side and wedge my way in, sneak in one of those windows there.
Okay. So the windows are fairly low. Basically, I'm going to have you ignore the danger, and I'm also going to give you just an extra die. So in my game, you can add or subtract one die, depending on if it's an easy or a hard task.
Mm-hmm.
And the windows are a little low, so I'm going to say that you can get 2 dice on this roll.
Okay, so then I'm using Orcish Strength as my talent. Gives me. Do you get 1 die for trying, or do you actually build from talents?
No, build just from talents.
Oh, wow. So if you're not using one of your talents, you don't roll. It just doesn't happen. That's neat.
Yeah. Well, so you can roll, but basically you never get a success. Even if you would roll a success, it counts as a partial.
That's the worst. Okay. Let me roll these 2d6.
All right.
I have rolled a 5 and a 1, so I'll take the 5, please.
Okay. Basically, on a 5, I need to tell you what it would cost you to succeed. So you're able to pull yourself up, but if you do, you'll make a lot of scrabbling noises and probably alert some guards to where you are.
What's my alternative if I decide I don't want to alert some guards?
So if you don't want to alert some guards, you can probably lower yourself down and try and find a different way in, maybe bowling right through the front door or whatever your choice is.
Well, if I'm bowling through the front door, I might as well be fighting some guards. Let's do it. I'm going in. I'm going to fight some guards if I have to, because I'm pretty clever. You've heard that, right? I'm clever. So
I've heard
I'm
that
do
about you. So your plan is to climb up the window and just make the noise?
Yep, I'm willing to make a little bit of noise, because if I can take down whatever few guards are in that room or the corridor, then it's not like I've gone through the front door where every guard and their uncle is going to take me down. So yeah, that's my clever plan.
Okay, so you pull yourself up, the bricks kind of crumble at your feet, making a lot of noise, and you can hear the sound of footsteps charging to your location down the hallway. You know that the Queen's room is pretty close by, and you might be able to find it before they get there. What's your plan?
Ooh, well, my plan is to scramble in through the window, close the window behind me, and hide. Because I'm a giant orc, I'm sure there's some place that's larger than orc-sized where I could hide. Under a bed, perhaps in a closet, a wardrobe.
Yeah.
There's got to be something, right?
Absolutely. So there's probably both closets and wardrobes in the room. Take your pick. Where are you going to hide?
Oh, I want to hide in a wardrobe because I've heard that they're great gateways to magical lands. So there.
Absolutely. Okay, so you pull yourself into this armoire. I'm going to have you roll to don't get caught.
Oh, nice. Don't get caught is one of the moves here. All right, let me take a look at that one. When you try to deceive someone or do something without them noticing, make a roll. On a roll of 6, nobody notices. All right, so I am Goodness, I'm convinced I'm clever.
Yeah. It's a very clever hiding spot.
That's all I've got.
Okay.
I just rolled a 1.
Okay, that is a failure. And then one thing that For the Dungeon does special is when you fail, if one of the dice is a 1, it's a critical failure. And the way critical failure works is you give me a single word as a prompt, and then that's kind of how everything complicates. So, what's your one word?
Oh, goodness. Can it be ouch?
Okay, so you climb into this wardrobe. Unfortunately, you're not as clever as you think you are. The guard sees you immediately and thrusts it open and then just stabs straight into the wardrobe. So I'm going to have you roll for harm. Essentially, you just roll 3d6 and then hope you don't roll a 1. As the highest, obviously.
Haha. I've rolled a 6, a 4, and a 5, so that, I could have used that earlier, but that's fine.
All right. Still alive, but keep going. So you have this guard in front of you. You are in this wardrobe. He clearly does not want you to be there, and you are not as clever as you thought. What are you going to do next?
I burst out wearing a gown that I found in there with my axe.
It's a very nice gown.
He probably wouldn't want to ruin the gown, so I'm hoping that it's some kind of, immunity to being stabbed.
All right. So if you're going to burst out and try and just go for him with the axe, I'm going to have you roll Get Violent. Sounds like you have both the axe and your strength to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Go for it.
All right, so I'm rolling 2d6. Here we go. My best is a 4.
Okay. You can either take the harm while you're doing this, or the best you can do is to get them to run away instead of hurting them, completely taking them out of the fight. So what's your choice?
What if I had done something earlier that nobody noticed? Because I do have sneak as a perk. What if I had snuck a pot in and it just happens to be underneath this gown right where he might have stabbed me?
Yeah, sounds great. So you've got this extra pot, and I say you can use this pot to pretty much do whatever you want to maybe knock him out, maybe trim. What's your plan with the pot?
Oh yeah, I think he stabs me in my big orcish gut, but his patang, and then I thwack him with the flat of my axe and knock him out. And now I can continue on to the queen because I'm good at sneaking. You didn't believe it, but it's true.
Sounds good. So you are in this bedroom. You notice that it's actually fairly opulent, and you would guess that this is probably the queen's chambers, but you don't see any queen.
That's okay, because all I need is a hair. I'm looking for her. She has a armoire or perhaps a little vanity where I could look for a brush.
Okay, I'm going to have you go ahead and roll to look around.
Okay.
You're just kind of searching for information or something.
All right. I think I'm clever. I think that's all I've got.
Yeah, and it's I'm going to say you pretty much have a lot of time, so I'm going to say it's fairly easy and just give you another die just because you've already taken care of that guard.
All right. I rolled a 5 and a 1. I'll take the 5.
Okay. You notice a lot of the supplies. So essentially this is just a more vague answer. There are a bunch of bathroom-type items off on a sink somewhere, and you can try and rummage around there. It's probably going to take you a little bit of time to find the hair, but you can go for it.
I'm ready to go for it. In fact, I flip the pot over and I start moving things into the pot. I'll take this. Oh, some hair gel. Okay, awesome. There's some kind of other comb. And it looks like, some tweezers. Yeah, that might have a hair in it. Just take it all.
Just going crazy, shoving everything you can in the pot. There's bound to be something in there with a hair. Mm-hmm. All you have to do now is get out and return to the wizard.
Ooh. Well, I've got to carry this pot now. And before I just had it, slung from my belt. So I think I'm going to try climbing down and out of here. It's the smartest way, and I am very clever. Did I mention I'm pretty clever?
Incredibly clever. Okay, go ahead and ignore the danger one last time.
All right. I think that it's going to take a lot of strength.
Yep.
And again, I said I'm being clever, so I'm convinced of that. So
sneaking out after you've gotten everything, go for it.
Okay, here we go. Oof, a 4 and a 3. This is not good.
Okay, you're able to get out pretty easily, but you notice that the noise you've been making previously had attracted a lot of guards. There's a line of guards between you and what is essentially a set of woods where you can escape. How are you going to get through the guards?
Ooh, so they're outside of the castle, or they're
Yes.
up with...
So they are outside of the castle. You were outside of the window, but you noticed they had kind of walked around to kind of see what the previous noise was about.
All right. So I'm pretty clever, and I am wearing a gown. So I think I'm going to just try to bluster my way through. Just walk through like I'm a fine lady, and I'm just heading to the woods because of the tea party.
Okay. I'm going to have you roll Don't Get Caught again. So it's going to be easier because you got the dress, and then you're very clever. So that sounds like 2 dice. Go ahead and just saunter past them.
And I'd like to reveal, because of twice each session, I don't know why, but I had placed a very nice fan. You know, like you fan yourself, like a little near my gear that I didn't want to climb up with. So I pull that out and I cover my face so they can't tell me how to work.
Even better. I'm going to say just almost use that as a scene trait. Go ahead and just take an extra die. I say go for it.
All right.
All 3.
Cool. 3 dice coming in. And that is 2 6s and a 1.
Okay. The guards are completely fooled and completely confused as this very burly woman in a dress with a fan, hiding her face, just saunters past them. They seem very confused, but they don't seem to stop you. You are well on your way to returning these items to your wizard overlord.
Here I come, Moloch! All right, man. Jordan, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to play a little bit of For the Dungeon. This is a really cool Kickstarter. Is there anything about the Kickstarter that you wanted to make sure the listeners had a chance to know about?
Not gonna think of just the basics. So For the Dungeon on Kickstarter, pretty much just trying to do digital or PDFs. It's an improv comedy kind of based RPG, just about playing minions and doing what you can. So
cool. And I do like the add-ons that you have in here, a deck of mini prompts. I think that one, I almost want that. Regardless of the game, it looks really cool. And then the map of discovery, which is a nice little dry erase map. Those add-ons look pretty cool. So I will have a link to the Kickstarter in the show notes for folks to check out. Thanks again, Jordan, for coming on and talking about For the Dungeon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
+1 Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at +1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for +1 Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Hi listeners, I want to tell you about Gauntlet Hangouts. Gauntlet Hangouts is where members of the Gauntlet community go to play games. Our community organizes over 200 online game sessions per month, each of which can be found listed on the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar, and each of which is open to the public. No experience with a game is ever required to play, and most games are run in an open table style, meaning you can join an in-progress series or campaign midstream. Here are some of the games being played on Gauntlet Hangouts in May. Stonetop, Scum and Villainy, Trophy, Mutants in the Night, The Veil, Dungeon World, Masks, Night Witches, Good Society, and Apocalypse World. And that's just a small sample. The best way to get involved in Gauntlet Hangouts is to join the Gauntlet Patreon at the $8 or higher level. That pledge level gets you early RSVP access to new games that hit the Gauntlet Hangouts calendar, as well as the other benefits of Gauntlet membership, such as the Codex Zine and access to our Slack group, where we chat about the games we have been playing. The $8 Patreon tier has limited spots available, but new spots are opened every month on the 15th. So come get involved with the most passionate indie gamers around, and experience our legendary Gauntlet play culture for yourself. You can learn more about Gauntlet Hangouts on our website, www.gauntlet-rpg.com, and you can grab an $8 Patreon spot at patreon.com/gauntlet. Thanks.